on cloud. All right. So this is the Fusion interface here. Um, Basically, you have your general screen as far as it's laid out in a preset grid. That grid does move with what you build. So even though as I orbit around, and I'm orbiting first by holding down shift and then holding down third wheel mouse wheel. And you'll see my cursor changes from an arrow to the orbit icon. As I do that, you see you've got a grid. There are numbers at the edges. Those will at least give you reference, but you're not normally working at the edge of the grid. This is intuitive in that the grid will expand as you build a larger object. Now, as far as dimensions, the default dimension in Fusion is metric. So if you're less familiar with metric, that's why I was recommending getting a small, just a little 6-inch ruler or slash, 150 millimeter, 15 centimeter ruler. The dual piece, it's a good reference just to sit down or have sitting down in front of you. So if you're not familiar as familiar with metric, it's really handy to have, an inch is about that much. Or if I'm measuring an object, okay, it's right there. So I really recommend having that, but you don't have to have that. But anyhow, so first thing I really want to show you all is how to save and access your files. Most important thing. So up top left corner, you have your standard save icon, the old floppy drive. And one thing you'll notice I do really like about Fusion is when you mouse over something, a drop or a pop-up will appear that explains what it is. Now, save is obviously a save, but anytime you're unsure, hey, what does that tool do? Mouse over it, hold, and an image pop-up will come up that'll explain what that tool is. So if you're unfamiliar, super convenient. Anyway, upper left-hand corner, you have your file. Open that. You'll have your variety, but you can save however you like. Now, saving this Fusion 360 saves on cloud storage. You can save local files directly on your computer, but it works through cloud storage. Has some drawbacks, obviously, because you lose connection or you're working in a place that doesn't have Wi-Fi. You can't save to the cloud. That said, it will save your file locally temporarily, and then when you're reconnected to the internet, it'll save it. The issue with that being because Fusion is designed around being able to be accessible via Teams. It's meant to be a sharing program to where if you were either, say, you yourself were working in multiple locations, rather than having to have like your computer come with you, things like that, you can go to a different computer that has Fusion and you log in and you instantly have access to all your files. I know I keep a thumb drive on my or a flash drive on my keychain anyway, but it's really convenient. It has some drawbacks, but it's really convenient. So you save, brings up different stuff. Now, right here, I already have default our class team folder. Now, this is what I sent out the invites to. Let me cancel that and show you exactly what I'm actually talking about. The far left button, this little grid, show data panel. This is your data panel. Now, right there we go. We have all the ones I sent out, and obviously I have to send a couple of different ones. But let me go out to home, our class folder. Oh, I don't have anything else going yet. Is going to be this team folder. Pardon me. Spring 2021, blah, blah, blah. I only have right now the first assignment folder placed. You can save into there. What that'll be is you can save your own and then copy it over. What I mean by that, if you look further up, top left hand, this is the team account, BSU 3DM, 3D modeling. Should have 3D printing, but I forgot that when I was making it. You click that, you can swap between the shared team and your personal storage. there is a drawback. You cannot directly save if you are working on like some personal projects. And I'll switch over to mine. Oh, it's doing it. There we go. Blah, blah, blah. I've got a bunch of different stuff I was working on. I cannot save directly from my files over to our team. What you have to do is copy it and then load it. But we'll talk about that here in a few. But right now, we're going to work in our team folder. Looks like there's a couple. Don't know why that's requested. Weird. And
Never mind that second one. That was you.
Oh, yeah, that's me. I was like, wait a minute, I know that guy. All right. So that's the data panel, whatever you want to call it. So that's how and where you're going to be storing. Obviously, we'll be going over that in more detail as needed. So this is your main, I'm just going to do it by hand. Yeah, you can't see that. This is your main interface. First things I want to go over is, like I said, the hierarchy tree. Over here on the left where it says unsaved, this is your hierarchy tree. You have your document settings. This is where you can change units. Like I said, default units is millimeters. Mouse over to the little pen and pad, click on that. A toolbox comes up and you can change it out if you like. Just so you know, it's not going to change the actual size of anything you're working on. It's just going to change how it's measured. So if you made it in inches and made it in inches and change it to millimeters, it's not going to resize it. It just recalculates the numbers. Excuse me. Down here is your standard views. Now, anyone that is that has any experience with CAD programs, whatever, you're often probably going to be used to seeing your interface in 4 different grid views. That's what is being referred to here, top, front, right, home. To change that, if you would like, bottom center, and I know I'm going to jump around a little bit here, but that's kind of how it references back and forth. In the bottom center tools, here in the bottom of the center of the screen, far right, viewports. If you click that, you have the option multiple views, or as it says on here, you can press Shift exclamation point. That changes the default view settings to your 4 views. And top left is top, bottom left is front, bottom right is right, and your top right view is your perspective view. So if you're drawing something, this is the more traditional viewpoint or view settings. If you like to work that way, great. I often like to work this way, but sometimes it's more effective. Sometimes it's a little bit more confusing. But again, if not, just change back over. Either come down here, go back to single view, or hit Shift I. Goes back to full perspective. And sometimes this is just, this is just the default view. And I don't know, I've kind of gotten used to it, so I find it a little bit more effective for me. And as you work, more things will appear down here. This hierarchy tree will expand. Speaking of things that expand as you work, down in the bottom left hand in the actual screen, not my toolbar, you'll see these little play buttons. Play, forward, fast forward, reverse, fast reverse. This is your timeline. You can, as we build things, make changes to objects and all that such, this will expand outward. I'll pull up a older file and I'll show you what I mean. Let's see here. So I'll pull up this file that I was just working with. I was making a frame for my webcam. So right now, this is the default view. I'll change when we'll get to this in a bit, but you can change the coloring. This is where you can apply different colors to the thing or automatically assign colors to different parts, different components by pressing and holding Shift and then pressing in November. There we go. It automatically changes. Now you'll see on the bottom here, there's a whole bunch of little icons with different colors. And those refer to changes to different components, but all in linear time. So if I go and activate just one, We'll go with just the camera frame. Now it changes and isolates just that part. Everything else becomes a ghosted view, but now I can see just that part, and I can go back in time and make adjustments. So if I decided, oh, you know what, before I made that adjustment, I really should have added something, or I need to go back and delete something, but without Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, you can go back, make an adjustment, and then when you use the slider to pull back to present, it will recalculate which the changes you have made. Obviously, we'll be explaining that more as we go through, but really cool feature of Fusion. Up at the top, you can change and add designs, like make a new file. Obviously, yes, you can go to the standard new file, new design, but also Fusion works like an internet viewer. So you can just press the plus sign and it opens a new tab. That's basically that is a new design. So that's how that changes around. Okay, so that's the history slider. That's the hierarchy tree. You can change how the views are, as in how does the thing look for you. I'll go back and reactivate the whole thing, the whole project. Bottom center, you have your display settings. You can change a bunch of things here. Visual style is how your project appears to you. It does not change anything about the actual project. It just cycles through how it looks. I like to work with hidden edges so I can see through the thing, but maybe you like to see only, you can see the edge lines, but only what's visible. So cycle through that, play around with it. You can change the background. Sometimes I prefer to work, and of course they have to have like color swatch names. Tranquil blue, like if you like to see it more of as a blueprint. Often, especially if we're working like later at night, I'll change it to a darker view just so it's less harsh on my eyes. Again, they're neat little options, but it's also just that it's an option. So play around with those as you like. Now I forgot which one I was on. I think it was photo booth. Sure. Now you switch back and it's super aggressive. Now, the second to the right, this is where you could make changes to your grid. Right now, if I wanted, I could remove the grid entirely. There's also snap to grid and grid lock. Grid lock just means it locks all the settings. Snap to grid, when you're drawing stuff, it automatically snaps your cursor, your stuff will automatically snap to the grid. You can make adjustments by clicking grid settings. Play around with it. Adaptive or fixed. Adaptive means the grid grows and shrinks as you're building things. Fixed means it stays the same size. It's up to you. Again, that doesn't really change anything that you're working on. You can set increments, which means when you're dragging something, how far does it go? Honestly, it sets to 1 millimeter for each move. Sometimes I like to change that up because it's a little bit limiting, but that's how you can change that. So those are pretty much the basics on just how to see what you're working on. Now, as I said, just real quick before we move on to this, I'll look back over to the hierarchy tree. So on the left-hand side of the actual screen, this is what I was talking about as far as when I started from nothing, there's just 3 little icons from the bottom. When I switch back to that camera frame I was working on, now there's a whole bunch of them. At the very top, that's the main thing. Now, it is a overall component. That's what I was talking about before. Component contains bodies, sketches, other stuff. This icon of stacked little boxes, and you'll see that also in the toolbar up top. As I mouse over it, new component. That's how you create multiple components. And that's how on here, is it views? These different colors are assigned to each different component. That's just automatic. If I switch back to appearance view, again, holding shift and pressing in, I can actually put appearances on there. Like if I want one part to look like it's made of wood, one's made of gold, one's made of stone. That can help you with like, if you're actually manufacturing it. Also, it just looks neat. But I often just like to look at or see in auto color just because it helps me figure out what I'm looking at. If I expand any one of these, I expand that out. Now there's an origin. We'll talk about that. Now there's bodies. The body is the actual thing. I can hide that, and that's the handle there. When I mouse over each one of these components inside of here, see it's just a little square. That's because it's not holding any other components. To the side, I can activate that little button. That isolates just the thing I'm working on. If I expand the bodies, I know it's always creepy sounding. You have bodies. Oh, because this one was created from something else. Let me change that one. Okay. We're looking at just the weird square thing. If I expand that out, now underneath there's bodies and sketches, because this was developed out of a sketch that I drew and extruded it out. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about that. So I'm just going to close this out, and we will go over some of the basics here. Now, it's going to make a lot more sense for us to go over the basics as I introduce the assignment. So I'm going to pause the video, and we'll talk. Okay, so like I said, I wanted to best explain Fusion through actually putting some references in. So what we're going to do is the first assignment, I'm going to go over this. So what your first assignment is basically going to have you create your own badge, your own emblem. And that can be with whatever you would like that to be. Got some examples down here. You want to make you want to make yourself a little mud horn. Yeah, we're all going to go with Mandalorian stuff. You want to make just like your name here sort of thing. That's fine. I've had plenty of other examples. I'll show some examples in a moment, but basically it needs to be sketch based, 2D flat and sketch, as in within Fusion, a sketch. What we will then do is extrude that into a 3-dimensional object, and that'll be your part. So what that means is we'll be going through, we're doing the initial modeling in class, and you'll finish it on your own time. Now, it does say Monday, February 15th, which is this coming Monday. Probably a little fast, but also want to make sure to address for everybody. Remember that this coming Monday, February 15th, is President's Day, no classes. We will meet Wednesday. Wednesday, the 17th, is a Monday schedule. So just keep that in mind, or write it down, because I won't remember it unless I write it down. So basically what this assignment really focuses on is learning file saving and the interface. So again, startup introduction project. We will learn about importing canvases, making sketches, and that includes text. And we're going to go through some of the text options, as well as different element commands and types in Fusion 360, and basically the extrude function, or the extrude command, like I said, which will take a line drawing, a sketch, extrude it into a 3-dimensional body. So as far as requirements for the project, it should be sketch-based. That's pretty much where it ends. Whatever you want to do, that's up to you. So let me change team folder again. I will go to one of our previous years, or previous semesters rather, and show you some examples. So I showed some of these to you, to some of you last week. So I had some examples. One student did a Morty coin, playing with different text components, different layers of extrusion, different tiers, and just playing around with some different elements. Basic design, and that's fine. One student made a ketchup badge. Whatever. They like ketchup, and it was anything that's, well, anytime you can make something dumb and fun, well, then why not? Another student made just I think this was actually based off of I can't remember if this is based off of Avatar or I think Fire Emblem is the game. I don't remember. Either way, neat design. They played with doing one sketch and rotating that whole design and making what's called an array of copies in a circle. Neat design. And I don't remember what this one was. I think this was from Attack on Titan. But as you can see, the design is, if you're looking straight down, or better yet, I will hide the bodies, which, yeah, that always sounds good and creepy, and show the sketches. This is what you'll be creating. Basically, a two-dimensional sketch, flat, and you can select elements inside of here and pull that upward through an extrude command, and you'll end up with a virtual three-dimensional object. So that's pretty much what you're doing. How you go or where you go with that, that's entirely up to you. So let me close all these out. And sometimes, unfortunately, it does save things because it automatically saves, which sometimes is usually very useful if you forget to save, but it's also problematic if you were just looking at something and didn't want to change anything. Anyhow, where do you start? Well, first, I would recommend starting with just some different drawings and such. Look at some options, look at some different drawings. If you do drawings on your own, be it actual sketching, hand-drawn, or if you work in tablets or work digitally, like on a tablet or something, you can import those drawings. Let me move this out of the way. And get my examples here. All right. So you can start, if you would like, by inserting a canvas. And what a canvas is simply a background image that you are not interacting with at all, other than showing something that you can make to scale and then draw on top of it. And there's, of course, if the drop down, you can insert other elements, but for now, the default one up here is insert canvas, an image. Select that. You can pull stuff from your own or from different files and such if you like, or insert from computer. Let me see here. Where is that? Oh, that's the desktop classes. So just have some basic, sure, why not? You will have to select what plane you're working on. Like I talked about before, the x-axis, which is your red, goes left, right. Your y-axis, the green, goes front, back. Z-axis, the blue, goes straight up and down. You can work up on the wall, which would be the XZ axis. You can work flat down, which would be the XY axis. You could work at a diagonal, or not a diagonal, at a perpendicular. I would default to the flat plane, the XZ axis. You have to select a plane you want to work on because you can work in 3 dimensions. So select there, and it should default. It should redirect your view, but if it doesn't, in the upper right-hand corner, you have what's called your view cube. You can select different views automatically off of that. Select the top, and it will select downward. I can zoom in with the mouse scroll, and hooray for R2-D2. Now you can scale this image. You can move it around. You can non-uniform scale it as well. So let me show you, let me walk through some of the options to move. Your blue arrows, when you mouse over, click and hold. That's how you can slide it back and forth. Click and hold this one, up and down. You can move things numerically, as you see that as I click and drag, this little pop-up bar, or this little pop-up toolbox, the numbers keep changing. I could change this. All right, you know what? I wanted it not 7, but 5.5 millimeters. You set that in that way. I'll just go back to 0. There we are. You'll have this arc tool. This is common for a lot of these, or for a lot of tools, meaning all of these options. Mouse over the little circle on the arc, grab that. That's how you can rotate. Again, you can do it by hand, or you can enter it numerically. If I wanted it 15 degrees, 20, whatever. You can just grab right in the center, this square. This allows you to free transform, to move it without object snapping, meaning it moving incrementally. I don't want it to, so I'll just go back to 0. Oops, I've moved it around and now it won't go back. No, that's okay. Whatever, doesn't matter. And then you have your scale buttons. You can scale it up and down by clicking and dragging. The center one, the little one in the corner, that is your uniform scale. The others, non-uniform scale. So I'm just going to change that around. You can also set the opacity if you want it to be just a very light ghost there. If you want to be able to actually select it, you have inside the toolbox, you have all of the pop-up toolbox, you have all these options. So those are the things you can play with. If you were, say, wanting to make a stamp from an image, you, especially if it was text, you brought in text, obviously you'd like it reversed. You can select these little hourglass flip symbols, which is actually a triangle flip back and forth, or that's also up here. Click those and it will move it. It'll mirror it. Pretty cool. So I'm going to cancel this because I want to redo that. And do the same because I want it to snap in place. Okay. So I would like to scale this by, I don't know, 5. Sure. I'll show you how to actually scale it to fit in a moment. So there we go. By the way, if you need to resize the screen automatically, press F6 and it will recenter what you're working on and set it in the center of the screen and resize so you're seeing it maxed out. Okay. So that's your image. Cool. Well, now what? Well, now you're going to start with a sketch. And the upper toolbar here, a couple things I'm going to tell you about the toolbar up here. You can change these. You can add and subtract tools from here, but the whole interface of Fusion 360 is intended to be intuitive, meaning it will change with what you need, which is kind of neat, kind of irritating. As in, if you're looking for something and you have former experience in a different program, it really kind of trips you up. Yeah, I know it really drove me pretty crazy when I was first learning Fusion 360 because I was used to a different program. But what we're going to start with is a sketch. So if you go all the way to the left of your toolbar, top here, create sketch. You mouse over it, tells you some examples. Now the toolbar, after you select what plane I'm working on, still working on the bottom, flat, now your toolbar suddenly changed. This is what I'm talking about. Some are super handy, some kind of problematic. Now you can start working with different tools, different items. So first you have your straight lines. You can make rectangles, center circles, ellipses, fit point spline, which is a curve based on points you select. You can mirror stuff, take dimensions, rectangle, circular pattern, text. Now that's not everything. At the create bar here, that's your drop down. Now you have the whole thing. Now you have all your sketch options. And what you can do is like these ones that expand out. If you mouse over them and any of the other ones, like line, it actually has a hotkey L. That'll bring up the line tool. But there's these vertical ellipses. If you click that, little expansion toolbox pops up, and you can add or subtract these to your toolbar or your tool box. And I'll show you what that means right now. As we talked about with, there will be some glossary terms here at the bottom. You have some shortcuts. The first one I put on is S, Model Toolbox. In Fusion, press S. It will bring up, that's your search, sketch shortcuts, anything. This is where you can install some shortcuts right here, or this is where you, if you actually are looking for something specific, this is where you can type in, I'm looking for line. You start typing line, it brings up line. So this is where you can find your actual searchable things if you are more familiar with or prefer to work that way. A lot of this is set up to where whatever your workflow is, that's how you can work. It's, again, meant to be kind of intuitive to your work style. So instead of line, we're going to start with the fit point spline, because that is a line based on points. What you're going to do, you start somewhere, and the first section is just a straight line. But once you start making more, it will create curves out of that. To finish something, you press enter. Don't hit escape when you're finishing something like that, or it'll delete the whole thing. When you're working with these lines, if I zoom in here, you'll see I've got my blue line, which is the one I made. But then there's also all these little green lines. These are your handlebars. If you click and drag any of these, you can click and hold rather. You can drag them, move them up and down. You can see how it twists the line. That green line is just the reference for how that line is created. It kind of shows just an extension of the circle that line is being based on. If I move it in and out, it stretches that circle way out. But that's way not what I'm trying to do here. So I'll hit Control Z, snaps it right back. So there's a lot of options with that. So that's a fit point spline. Well, cool, that's curves. What about a straight line? Well, that's just a straight line. A straight line, and I'll just start somewhere in here, you can just work along. Now, there's a lot going on here, and I'll show you what that means. First off, like we talked about before, in grid and snaps down here in the bottom, snap to grid, having that selected, your cursor will snap to points on the grid. And as I zoom in, it subdivides those squares. So if you're zoomed far out, it'll be a little bit more of a coarse selection, meaning like you can't really select exactly where you might want, but those are all at 1 millimeter increments. But if I zoom way in, now I'm selecting at a much finer scale. So it's just designed to make it easier to select things. Now, the other thing, okay, I'm going to select on corners and such. Neato. You don't have to, but it's a good way to work. Yeah, I'm just making it like a doodle here. All right, I'm seeing all these different things going on. What is all of this? Well, you can draw the whole, this is a drafting program in effect. So if you're trying to do something specific, I can just click and drag, or I can enter things numerically, meaning, all right, by default, that blue highlighted bar is telling me the length of the line. All right, I want this one line to be 5 millimeters. I hit 5, and that little gold lock symbol comes on. That means that is now locked at 5 millimeters long. Now I can select the arc length based from the previous line. If I need to get over there and change, if I want to actually set the arc, the angle there, I hit tab and it selects over. Now I can say, I'm going to make that 115 degrees. There we go. Now I can hit enter, and that one line will be different. Now, since I added actual dimensions, you'll have actual dimensions. So those super convenient if you're trying to actually draw something specifically. But otherwise, you can freehand stuff with a line tool and the ellipse tool, or sorry, and the fit point spline. Those are going to be your main go-tos. But let's say you're just trying to draw something, like I said, you're working on breaking up this line here, super good. Or I'm sorry, you're trying to recreate R2 here. You can keep going, moving along. You can try to keep this as sharp as you can, but I want to make a sharp angle to change that. So I don't want any more points there. Hit enter, hit stop that last one. And problem is I accidentally hit 2 buttons. I hit shift enter. So I'm going to control Z that and or command Z if you're on Apple and do that again. Somewhere-ish about there. That works about right. All right, less terrible that time. You can change these around if you say, like, I started the second line at the junction of this first line, the vertex. I can move that. If I click and hold that line or that point, I can actually click and drag it and move that around. So none of this is set. You can play around with this. And honestly, that's what I'm going to tell you to do for a lot of this project. Play around with this. Don't feel I set that date. We're going to see how it goes. My intent is I would like to review the projects on the 15th or 17th rather, and go from there. I'm sure people have questions. So I am going to change that date either way. All right, so let's make some circles. And center point circle. I can just kind of select somewhere roughly in the center here. And now I can draw outward. I'm trying to make that circle there, like the I keep wanting to say eyeball, whatever, camera point, whatever. It's a robot, droid technically. I made one circle. If I mouse over the center one again, I can click again. It'll just snap right to directly to the center. And I can keep making more and more circles. Pretty straightforward on that one. I can make big circle, play around. So again, this is basically just playing around with this stuff. But let me just move over here and just show you some tools without without trying to reproduce R2. So I have the line tool. I can just play around with creating lines. As I move around, you'll sometimes see these little dotted lines show up. What that's referring to, like this dotted line just appeared in red. That means it is lining up with the x-axis. It's going straight across from that previous point. I start to move down, and that blue dotted line appears. You'll see it's connected to that x of this line. That's the midpoint. That's the middle of that last line. So you'll see that appear. That's how you can play around with those. Now, if I say I wanted to create a arc off of the end of this line, what I can do is start one, come back, and if I hold shift, now move out, it'll create an arc. Sorry, not hold shift. I didn't mean to hold shift. You click and hold the left click mouse. The trick to that is you have to move the line out, then come back, click and drag, then it'll make an arc. And all that is just a circle based off of the last one. Now, one of the things I do want to go over also, you see all these symbols appearing right above all of this where it says constraints. This is how you can augment your lines with constraints, with requirements for those lines. What this line is, this circle with a line on it, that's a tangent. So the thing is if I create different line components and such, I can affect changes without having to know them already. This is super convenient if you're actually trying to recreate something by numbers or different things interacting. Let me show you what I mean by that. We'll ignore the tangents and such for now. Let me just delete those so that's out of the way. Now, how did I select those? Let me just draw a couple of little details here, and we'll go over selection points. So I selected those. You can, of course, select things by individually clicking on ones. If you want to select more than one, you press and hold Shift, just like you would selecting multiple other things. And now I can select multiples. But what if I want to just select things with a click and drag box? It does matter what direction you click and drag. I'm going to click and hold from the right and drag my selection box to the left. It's a yellow dotted square. Selecting click and drag, selecting from the right will select everything that box touches. However, if I click and drag, select from the right and drag left, now it's a solid box. Now it will only select things that are completely inside of that box. Again, stuff that you'll get to learn, stuff that you'll figure out as you go along. But constraints, how can I make this stuff work for me without like clicking and dragging and moving stuff around? Now you can of course do that. You select something, the modify tool isn't up by default. You have to click down, move copy, but you can also just press M. Now it brings up the move tool, select something, and now you can move it around. Now you have your click and drag, whatever you want to do, standard. Okay. Neato, I can move stuff. But say what I really want is this circle to touch this circle, but I don't want to like just super carefully drag it by. Well, what I can do is I can select this circle. Well, let me first explain something to you. In Fusion, when you're trying to move something, dependent on constraints or anything else, the first one is what you're selecting, what you want to move. The second is where you want it to move to. So try to keep that in mind. The first thing you select is what will move. The second is where it'll move to. Click this one and say, I just want these two circles to touch, but I want to move this circle to that one. I will select the tangent button, constraint, select this circle. Now I select that one, and it didn't do it at all what I told it to do. Oh, it already snapped it in place. Screw you. Yeah, sometimes it does stuff exactly what you're not trying to make it do. Let me Control Z that one. That's because I had already moved this one and it changed its position. You can use these constraints to make things equal. You can make just all kinds of different stuff. Say like, let's start more simply left to right. All right, horizontal, vertical. I select this. What that means is I want this line to be horizontal or vertical. What it's going to do, horizontal, vertical, it's going to snap that line to be closest to what I want it to be, where it already is. That one was pretty vertical already. This one's fairly horizontal. If I click that, it's going to snap it to be horizontal. Same thing again. What's really the reason that's even there is if you're drawing something, say you're just trying to draw like a rough design, but because you're doing it by a mouse, sometimes you might accidentally make it not exactly straight. So how do I fix that? Horizontal perpendicular tool. That one was already kind of horizontal or vertical, already kind of horizontal. Now the problem is sometimes it finds odd snaps you did not intend. So you got to be careful with some of these constraint tools. Coincident means that stuff will touch one another. So if I had this line, let's just say start another line right there. I want that one to touch that one. First select, second select. Brings it in line, but I want it to touch. So that not collinear. I want you to, sorry, brain fart. I want parallel. Tangent doesn't work on not circles. Oh, yeah, and you can over constrain stuff. Yes, fine. Pop-ups. You will get pop-ups sometimes. You're trying to do too many things at once. Problem with that is I had already made several constraints to it, and it didn't want to do anymore. All right. So there's those. But honestly, a lot of this is going to be, and I know this is all over the map because there's just a lot of different things to play with. So horizontal vertical snaps things horizontal vertical. Coincident makes things align to one another. Tangent actually makes a straight line off of a circle or vice versa. So if I wanted to base this line off that circle, start one somewhere, draw it out, and we'll just say that's good enough. But if I zoom way in on the circle, see how it actually kind of cuts in. It's hard to see if you're not used to it, not used to looking at it. So if I hit tangent on that circle, now it's actual like mathematical tangent to that. All right, that's tangent. Equal to obviously means, again, it's equal to, hey, I want that line to be equal to that line. Now it changed it. Play around with this stuff. Perpendicular makes a line perpendicular. I want that line to be perpendicular to that line. Now it changed that line. The couple that I find the most useful are midpoint and concentric. Midpoint is when you want to snap a line to the midpoint. So if I'm trying to draw, say like, all right, I want to actually cut this sort of kind of box in half. It's not actually a box. So I'll draw a line. If I mouse over the line that I already have going somewhere, you'll see my cursor changes from a plus sign to an X. That means it's going to start on that line. And I'll just draw this down somewhere. Doesn't matter where. But what I actually wanted that line to be right in the middle of this line. So I hit midpoint. I click the first one because that's what's going to move. And I want it to move to the midpoint of this line. Why is it? Why is it not giving me an error? That's pretty straightforward. Okay, sure. Why would that not make sense? All right, awesome. I don't know why it's doing that. Always super helpful. It might be because I applied all these other constraints to it, and it might be kind of confusing itself. So I'll just draw another line here. Cool. Oops. Another line starting on that one. Good enough. Midpoint, that line to that line. Why is it? Awesome. I have no idea why it's giving me this error. That's a fairly straightforward thing. All right. Well, the other option is, get errors, and I have no idea why sometimes. The other option is if you're trying to find something right in the middle, if you mouse over that line, say like that line, as I move toward where I think the middle is, my cursor changes from just that X. Now that triangle floats above it. You can see a little more clearly. Unfortunately, the cursor doesn't enlarge as you zoom in. That's showing me that's the midpoint. That triangle is the symbol for midpoint. So now I can start there. I don't know why the hell it's giving me that error. That's really weird. Whatever. All right. The other one is concentric. Basically meaning that if I made a couple of circles inside of one another, I could snap them to be concentric to one another. So I just made that circle somewhere in there. That point shows the center. I want that circle to be concentric to this one. Now it's snapped in the middle. And the little symbol of the concentric circles means it concentric. But also, if you were trying to make multiple circles like that, if you select like the center diameter circle, mouse over your best guess of where the center is, it shows just like the midpoint automatic cursor, it shows the center one as well. If I mouse it in closer, you can see the little blue circle, same deal. All right, let me go ahead and delete some of this madness to just clean up the thing so I can show you where we're going with this. So I'm going to use the from the right selection to select anything the box touches. Those lines, that line, all of those. I'm going to leave this line. I'm going to show you why in a moment. All right. I kind of cleared some of this up. Now, this whole time, I've been showing you different things inside this sketch. This whole time, this toolbox over here, the sketch palette, they're floating toolboxes for a lot of tools, will be present. At the bottom here, you see Finish Sketch. Same thing at the top right hand of your toolbar, it says Finish Sketch. This whole time, I've been working on this sketch. If I click this, that basically goes out of the sketch tool set. So you see it back up the toolbar here, that's changed back again. What I'm going to do, now I can extrude. This is basically what we're going to be doing for your project. So I press the extrude tool, or if you press E, I can select different things and I can make those three-dimensional objects. So I'm going to select this one and I'm just going to orbit over, or if you would like, at the top right hand of your toolbox of your orbit cube, if I mouse over this orbit cube, you see the little home icon that appears. If I click that, it automatically snaps back to perspective with everything you can see. So obviously I'm going to ignore the R2 thing and zoom back in over here. To extrude, I can do it by hand, meaning click and drag the arrow, and it shows me. Right now, it's just a cylinder. I can do it numerically. Say I actually wanted that 12. Same deal. In the toolbox, you have a bunch of different options. A new one here is thin extrude. This does just the wall. So you actually are technically making a tube with this one. But say I had something more complex, it would just be the wall. But for now, I'm going to do just a solid extrude. I can play with the start points. Right now, starting profile plane, that's what we're working on. It's that whole plane we've been working on the whole time. Directions, I can do it one-sided. I can select and make it go two-sided individually. So I also wanted to go down 5 millimeters. Cool. Or they can be symmetric based off of the first dimension. I can extrude it to something. We're not going to worry about that right now. The measurement is just showing you different options on how it's measured. Right now, it's making that symmetric extrusion up and down, 12 millimeters each direction. Or if I select this one, whole length, now it's 12 millimeters total, or 6 in each, but it's basing off of 12 that I typed in. You can also taper them. So I wanted that just to be a little bit tapered. We'll just say 5. Positive numbers go outward. Negative numbers go inward. And at the bottom here, it says new operation, body. This is creating a new three-dimensional object. We're going to get into these other options in a moment and here in a bit. But for now, it's creating a three-dimensional body. Now, when I click OK, because Fusion assumes you're now done with your sketches, it automatically hides them. If you need to go back to them or make new extrusions or whatever, go to your hierarchy tree. You have the little eyeball symbol here. That's make it viewable. But it is viewable. Why can't I see it? Expand the hierarchy tree. Now you see that first set of sketches. The eyeball symbol is ghosted with a line across it. If I click that, now it's viewable again. Now I can go through and play with this. Now, this is the part that I wanted to show you. That was just a basic extrusion of like just a circle. Well, look what happens when I mouse over these concentric circles, but I left that line in there. If I select one of these, you see it is excluding any of these lines. You don't have to trim lines necessarily in Fusion. I'll go back into the sketch and show you what I mean by that, but meaning that you can select parts. Fusion assumes that you left that line in there to divide up your drawing. Basically, Fusion works on anything it sees, it assumes that you want to use. Meaning that if I was cutting into parts and it's visible, it's gonna cut into it. I'll explain that more later. But for now, let's say I want, well, that's the whole thing because that line only extends part of the way. So let's say I want just that part. And I'm gonna, now that line is highlighted in red. When I press the extrude button, it's gonna assume I'm gonna go positive with that. Okay, let's say 3 millimeters going up, but I still have the rest of the sketch. What do I do with that? Right now, the operation is new body. That's fine. Created a new body. But say I made this because I want this part to go positive, but I also want like a large base for it. Now I can select this part and go downward. Do the same thing. Extrude. I just pressed E, but I'm going to go to a negative number. Now, right now, it still says operation new body. I'm going to go downward. Still says new body. That's because, let me go underneath here. That's because it's only selecting that outer ring there. If I go underneath, and let me just cancel out of the profiles I've selected, the sketches I've selected. Now I'm going to hold down Shift and select both this one and that one. Well, now it's extruding that whole thing. And you see at the bottom, this operation automatically changed to join. Now it's going to make the one that goes up and the one that goes down, one solid thing, one solid body. And it's automatically going to join them. I did not select that little chunk inside, and it's going to leave that as a whole. Click OK. Now I have this stuff. All right. So now I have the body. Super good. What do I do with this? Or is this it? Is this all I could do with it? Not at all. You can now draw on top of these surfaces. You don't just have to draw on the plane. I'm going to hide the original sketches just because I'm trying to see what I'm doing. Now I can start a new sketch, say on here. So for what we're doing, if I wanted to add more stuff to this, now I can draw directly on top of this surface. So now as I draw, I'm not drawing on the original plane. I'm actually drawing on top of that surface. Oops, did not want to do that. Meant to do that one. Sometimes the problem with the selection is it won't go away and you end up selecting more and more things right there. All right, so that has started an entirely new sketch. If I click OK, and now you see at the bottom of the timeline, that has a new sketch forward over here. So I have these sketches now, and let me see if I can pan down a little bit so you can see a little more clearly. See, these new sketches are not on the original plane. These are sitting on top of this little half cylinder here. I can play around with this now. Let's say I'm going to take these two, and I'm going to use the extrude tool. Right now, the operation by default is new body. But if I grab this and sink down, it automatically changes to cut because now it's assuming I want to remove that material from inside. If I click OK, now I have 2 holes there. It again hid the sketches. That's irritating. Click extrude again. Select there. Now I can go positive again. Automatically goes to join. You don't have to go to join. That could be a simple separate thing, but for now, that's what we do want to do. Letting it compute. There we go. So those are basically what you're doing with playing around with extruding. What I want you to focus on for now is really just playing around with sketches and experimenting with drawing either your own drawing on top of a canvas or just free forming it. That's fine too. But one other thing I want to show you in here. I'm going to create sketch. I'm going to select on top of this platform. One thing I want to show you is the text platform. New to Fusion is they updated the text options. You can, oh, geez, that went everywhere, didn't it? Oh, let's hide the canvas. There we go. So now I can write text 2 different ways. You have your standard text, which just creates it just like if you're making a text box somewhere. Click and drag a box. Neato. Giant. You can change the standard stuff. You have blah, blah. You can change the height, different fonts, standard stuff there for making text. Different alignments. You can flip it. Like I said, if you wanted to make like a stamp or something, it's reversed. The other option now is, in the other side of this toolbox, text on a path. You, of course, actually have to have a path made, but it will create text along a line, which will be, in this case, a path. So I'm going to cancel out of that text thing first, and I want to create text on a path. So I want to create on this circle, I'm going to create, I'll just use a center circle again. I'm going to view straight down. Now there's no sketch showing from the previous sketches, but when I have my center circle tool selected and I select my mouse close to where the center of that main circle is, you see the concentric constraint pop up. Now I know it's going to be centered within the circle. I drag out, yeah, 16 looks good. Okay, that's what I wanted. I'm not finished with the sketch. I'm just finished with the circle. Press enter, we're done. Now I want to create a sketch. I want to create, the sketch was right above the A. I want to create text on a path. Select the other A there that has your mouse over. It says text on a path. Now the next thing is you have to select a path. I want that circle to be my path. Oh my God. We clearly have to change the height because that is way too big. 10 millimeters is enormous. We'll go with 1. Now it's creating text along a path. So you can most certainly add text to what you're doing. You could adjust this, again, standard font stuff. Want it bold, want it italic, fine. You want to play with different fonts. I will warn you, some fonts act weirdly. And that's only because if they bunch up or something, if it's a font that has letters that kind of overlap, it will cause problems when you're trying to extrude them. But we'll deal with that. You have your different placement. You can have it above the path, below the path, fit to path, which means that it will space all of those letters and evenly space them around the path. Again, you can still flip them back and forth. Let's change this to, I don't know, bleep bloop. Whatever. So yeah, again, play around with stuff. We'll make this a little bit bigger. We'll go with 2 millimeters. 2 is clearly, again, way too big. 1.5.
And does color not matter at this point? Like I know it shows
Color
up as
doesn't.
blue.
Nope, that's
But
fine. Right
okay.
now, color is no, thank you. Color is just showing the text itself. It's simply highlighted so you can more easily see it. So we'll select OK. Now we have that. Now we have the text. All right. And again, as far as color goes, color is simply being shown as a default coloring. So I can now select, and if I mouse over any one of the letters, it's creating all of those letters as one sketch, but it's not selecting all of the sketch, just the letters. It assumes that you want to use all the letters. I select that one, and again, we're good. That's what I need. That's what I want. All that whole text chunk is one as part of the same sketch. Finish sketch. I can select all the letters. Now I press extrude. Now I can drag those letters upwards or downwards if you want. And it's automatically going to select, or the operation is automatically going to go for what it assumes you're doing. They go positive, it's going to join. I switch that number to a negative number. What happened? Why'd that go? Oh, 1 meter. No, not 1 meter, 1 millimeter. That's much better. So it changed the operation to cut. So again, main thing is I want you to play around with this. Now, I will warn you, if you want to print these, text is a finicky thing because they can get really small and it might not translate to printing, but honestly, we will deal with that as we go. Now, the one thing that is not on the assignment is a size constraint. I would say don't make it enormous, but at the same time, things can be scaled to fit on printers. But if you are unsure, like, you know what, I've just been kind of playing around with this. How big did I actually make this? The inspect tool. Mouse over right next to the canvas insert, measure. Now, there are some issues with measure, but whatever. We don't really need to deal with it right now because it's not really going to be a problem for what you're doing. This is a circle, so it's not going to show me one side to one side, but I select that circle and anywhere on it, it's assuming it's a larger part. Now in the toolbox, it showed me different parts. It showed me the length, which is actually circumference, radius, obviously from the center out, or diameter, it's 20 millimeters. Now, if you're unfamiliar with metric, you think, oh, 20, that's big. No, 20 millimeters is 2 centimeters. It's only that big. So you could, of course, scale things if you like. I'll just close that out. If you need to scale, press the S, which brings up your toolbox, scale. There you go. I can select that. This is by a scale factor. So if that were 2 millimeters, to the left, it's small. To the right, it's big. Now, this is only scaling the final thing. It's not scaling all your sketches and everything. So if you made it too small, do your sketch, finish the thing, and then scale it up. But if it was only 2 millimeters and say, 20 centimeters, damn it, it's going back and forth with both. 20 millimeters or 2 centimeters. If it's only 20 millimeters, I want it to be, 100 millimeters. So scale factor of 5, multiply. It's giant. But when I zoom out, R2's back. Now I go to inspect, click it again. All right. Now I have a diameter of, because it wasn't exactly 20 millimeters. Now it's 100 millimeters. Now it's about yay big, or about roughly 4 centimeters ish. So that's how you can scale stuff, play around with it. But honestly, if you do have one of these rulers, this is a good gauge. make it about no more than about 6 inches or 150 millimeters. That's a good size because that's about the size of what, or that's the largest, the smallest of our printers can make. And that's immediately confusing. But that's about the size of the print bed. All right. So again, I know I just threw just a whole bunch of stuff at you. So the main thing is I'm going to change the date immediately for the first project. The second one will be a little bit more smooth, or go a little bit more smoother, be a little bit smoother because you'll have a better frame of reference. So I want you to play around with the tools. Right now, we're just focusing on the sketch parts. Play around with the extrusions, but remember that everything is reversible, or at very least, I'll show you in the history slider. I click and drag, and I can go back in the history and start over or chop stuff out, whatever. Say, oh, poop, I should have made some adjustments before I scaled the whole thing up. Move the history slider before the scale. Now, anything you do will happen before the scale. And then when you finish, bring it back to current history, and it'll be giant again. It'll recalculate. Bunch of oddball stuff, but play around. We're going to experiment and go over troubleshooting next class, which will be Wednesday the 17th, because Wednesday is a Monday schedule, and Monday we don't have classes. But play around with it. And if you do have questions, please do email me. We can set up a session, and we'll go from there. So I will stop the recording there. Do you want to stop cloud recording? Yes.